Previously on The Star Wars. Princess in trouble! A rebellion leader and royalty, Princess Leia, races home with the stolen plans to the Empire's new secret weapon, the Death Star. Meet Luke Skywalker, begotten farm boy yearning for adventure. He and his mentor Obi-Wan have gotten hold of the plans and are taking them to Alderaan. Han Solo, smarmy rogue, takes them to the doomed planet. Darth Vader, right-hand man to the Empire, is diligently looking for these stolen plans. But it's too late. The rebellion has used the plans against them and have blown up the mighty Death Star. Will Leia and Han give in to their budding romance? Can Luke train to be a true Jedi? Does Yoda smoke some dank-ass weed? Find out on Swholli Star Wars Special, Episode 5.
Holy moly! Is it really November? Have I really made 5 episodes on one topic? This is probably the best thing I've ever done and also the worst thing I've ever done. It's been an interesting ride, to say the least. I'm sort of excited that it's over, because it means that episode 7 is almost here, and it means I'm almost done worrying about planning things for these goddamn videos, which means I could focus on doing way more shitty movies that people haven't heard of. But at the same time, I'm kind of sad it's almost over. I like talking about movies I enjoy, and even the prequels were sort of fun to talk about. But oh well, we're getting closer to episode 7, and that's really cool that we've made the wait worthwhile. So let's jump right into episode 5, regarded by most, including myself, to be the very best of the series. Number 1, the plot. Episode 5 starts with a bang. Alright, fine, I've beaten that joke to death by now, I get it. Episode 5 opens a few years after the end of Episode 4. The rebels have achieved a short stint of victory since blowing up the Death Star and are currently laying low on the icy planet of Hoth. The Empire is desperately trying to squash the rebellion as swiftly as they can, so they send out some probe droids to try and find them. Now, of course, our heroes from the first movie just so happen to be chilling out on their patrol over here, riding their tauntauns, blat blat, you know what I'm saying? Also, holy poop, does that stop-motion animation still hold up today? It's a very rare thing I get to say that about old movies, but the special effects in Star Wars are beautiful. Han and Leia have some of the beginnings of their romance, and we get to see the further evolution of Han's character. When he finds out Luke hasn't arrived back at the base, he instantly goes to help his friend rather than before when he was sort of hesitant at first. Hey, a question, why does this work? Does 3PO have to breathe? Do droids use air? If by you putting your hand on his mouth, how are you stopping him from talking? His noise box, you know what? Luke has stayed out to check on the probe droid, but is attacked suddenly by a wampa. This thing drags him into the ice cave and hangs him up to eat him later. Luke, in a cunning move, uses the Force to lift his lightsaber out from the snow in order to cut himself free. Later, as Luke is basically hallucinating from almost freezing to death, Ben appears to him as a Force ghost and tells him that he needs to travel to the planet of Dagobah to train with Yoda, just as Han arrives to save him. Han and Leia have even more romantic banter, and wow! It feels genuine! I mean, after watching so many movies with so many characters who have so little to offer when it comes to emotional support and character development, these scenes are so refreshing to come back to time and time again. Take note, future filmmakers, there is nothing wrong with basing your romances on a formula that works. If you want to watch Empire and say, hey, I can write witty banter like Han and Leia too, and you actually do that, moviegoers everywhere will thank you. Oh, just don't throw in any incest. So they finally figure out about the probe droids, realize the Empire's actually found them, and they begin their evacuation. However, it's a little late because the Empire has now begun their approach on the rebel base, and hang on a second. Can we talk about something real quick? What the fuck is the point of an AT-AT? I mean, sure, they are extremely iconic pieces of Star Wars universe and pop culture history, but do you really think that they make any practical sense in this universe? Now, of course, The point of any vehicle that uses quadruped movement system is so that it makes it way easier to traverse any kind of terrain. I mean, even the US military is currently designing machines that can walk upright on their own. It would make the use of wheeled vehicles or treaded vehicles which can't move on hilly or steep ground no longer needed. I mean, it's a sensible idea. It's basically a large ground soldier who also happens to be a tank. This is great and all, except for one small thing. We know for a literal fact that they have hover technology, thus defeating the point of anything needing to touch the ground at all. There is no longer an issue with making your way through heavy snow when you can just float over top of it. So the AT-ATs are literally just goofy walking tanks. I mean, sure, they look cool, but they serve no logical purpose in a universe like Star Wars. Plus, they are defeated by doing exactly what you'd expect to do. They just trip them. With wires. Like a clumsy elephant. But whatever, that's just a little nitpick I've always had. This is still one of the most exciting things in the movie. Like, remember the stupid as fuck Coliseum battle at the end of Attack of the Clones? Remember how there was no tension in it at all, and how none of the characters ever felt like they were in any danger, even though we had the whole movie built up to this point? Well, in Empire, we're only a half an hour in, and we're already as excited as fuck for everything that's happened so far, and we're not even remotely done with the movie yet. So anyway, they all get away, and Luke goes to Dagobah, and Han and Leia go to the Cloud City. If you thought the pseudo-philosophy of the last one was a bit much for your sci-fi space adventure movie, you really are not going to have a good time with this one, because we cranked that shit up to 11 that it becomes actual philosophy. Meanwhile, we also get some really great characterization of Darth Vader with this scene of him opening up his pod to talk to that dude. There's one guy, I don't know his name. We see that he's more than just a machine, but is still a frail and fleshy man underneath, all squishy. It shows his vulnerability and the deeper connection between the ideals of the Force versus the Empire's stagnant machine. So Luke finally meets Yoda, and is quite possibly one of the greatest scenes in all of movie history. I mean, every great mentor stereotype you know of in recent memory is modeled off of Yoda, and Yoda is geniusly modeled off of the ones that came before him. I know there have been countless discussions on the validity of Yoda, how the reveal was a genius move to conceal his power of the Force, how, Yoda as a small and seemingly insignificant being is one of the most powerful dudes in the entire universe, so I won't rehash the details there, but what I do want to talk about is the famously confusing cave scene.
That place is strong with the dark side. But it's very confusing and it stops the movie dead.
The metaphor of the cave has existed for quite some time, dating back as far as ancient Greece with authors like Plato and Homer. The cave represents what lies beneath the truth. The cave is below. It is dark, foreboding, and full of fear. We, as a species, are frightened of caves simply because, caves are scary as fuck. It represents the unknown, and Luke is frightened as shit. So, when he goes into the cave, he asks what's inside.
What's in there?
And Yoda tells him,
only what you take with you.
And so Luke goes into the cave where he sees the dreaded image of Darth Vader, his sworn enemy since killing Ben. They have a short saber duel, and upon slashing off Vader's head, Luke reveals that underneath his mask is merely his own face, staring blankly back at him. A reflection of who he is, and who he could become. This scene is indicative of two things. One, it's actually subtle foreshadowing to the fact that Darth Vader does end up being Luke's father, but two, it's a reflection, literally, of Luke's fears. Of becoming his father, of succumbing to the dark side, giving in to his hatred. See, Luke idolizes the Jedi because they represent to him the escape that he's always wanted. He's always wanted a bigger life than Tatooine, and it's possible that the Force was telling him that he was destined to. So when he sees the Jedi, he sees all of his hopes and his heroes personified before him. The dark side represents going back to Tatooine, going back to a way of life where he was always being told what to do and what not to do. It's probably the biggest reason he had for wanting to fight in the rebellion in the first place. Freedom is important to Luke, and it's his most well-defined characteristic. The scene in the cave is what best represents the entire theme of the Force. It's about Zen, it's about tranquility, balance in life, because Luke was so in fear of turning to the dark side he completely ignores Yoda's instructions to not bring his weapons. He becomes an aggressor and, ironically, gives in to the dark side. The lesson he was meant to learn in the cave was that he's supposed to face the unknown without fear. Fear is, after all, an ally to the dark side, and the dark side alone is not balance. He is further learning to trust in himself and in the Force. So meanwhile, Han and Leia have arrived to Bespin and are meeting with Lando Calrissian. But lo and behold, he turns out to have actually been reluctantly in cahoots with the Empire, and they pressured him into helping capture the rebels. Darth Vader is able to freeze Han into carbonite, giving to one of the, I say this again, greatest lines in cinema.
I love you.
I know.
I mean, this is, of course, super palpable, because we know that Han and Leia had on-screen chemistry in the first movie, and it's clearly been at least a year or two since then, so they've had a lot of time to develop their feelings. Plus, the entire movie up to this point was used establishing both these characters as well as their relationship with each other. When they finally confess their love for one another, it feels incredibly genuine and sincere. Again, so fresh. Luke has had a premonition of the events beforehand, where Han and Leia are in trouble, so he decides that he's going to leave his training despite the protests from Yoda. I do have some other things to say about this scene, but they're kind of more relevant later, so I'm going to talk about that in episode 6. So Luke goes to Bespin, where he meets Vader head-on. Here we finally get our first taste at a climatic battle between Vader and Luke. The atmosphere of this scene is probably the greatest thing on the planet. I mean, the set design is perfect, the balance of color is amazing, the lighting is just beautiful, and the framing and cinematography is the best. I could gush about this movie for hours. You don't want to sit here for that. Of course, we do finally get to the epic conclusion that this movie is most known for. After Vader slices off Luke's hand and has him crumbled at his mercy, Vader extends his hand to Luke and offers him a place by his side, the ultimate temptation of power. But what makes it worse is now we're revealed the biggest yet bestest plot twist ending of all time. Darth Vader, the abhorrent and evil lord of the Sith, is our hero's own father.
No, I am your father.
Not true. That's impossible.
I know it's not exactly a huge spoiler now, but at the time, that must have been the most mind-blowing shit on the planet. How something so evil could be even remotely responsible for the hero we all know that is Luke is such an astonishingly deep thought for an action-adventure movie. And that's ultimately what's cool about these movies, though. They are action-adventure movies, and if you're just like a little kid or someone who wants to like tune out and just enjoy the show, I mean, they're really good action-adventure movies. They're popcorn movies to the fullest. You know, like I said last episode, but you know what? They're just subtly deep enough to be enjoyed on all levels, and that's pretty fucking awesome. So, thank you, George Lucas? That feels dirty. I feel dirty. Well, anyway, we finished the climax of the film on a cliffhanger, which, while I know I've said before is bad, this time, it's pretty much expected, because while the plot was mostly resolved, we should probably all sit there and go, yeah, there's gonna be more to this story. Plus, Star Wars made like a bajillion, quadrillion, majillion dollars, so they can pretty much tell everyone to expect, hey, there's gonna be 9 movies in the Star Wars saga, and we'd pay to see all that shit. Oh, wait! That's what they did. So finally, Luke gets a cool robot hand, Lando and Chewie fly off looking for Han Solo. Apparently, Lando just decided to wear Han's clothes some reason, and Leia, Luke, 3PO, and R2 all stare off into the distance without moving for like a little while. That must have been really weird. After the scene was over, did someone cough? Did they say, hey, so what do we do now? Number 2. Let's look at some fan theories. So, that's about it. That's all I had, really. Most of this episode is literally just the plot of the movie with, a few things thrown in for good measure. And the reason for that is because this is literally, like I've said, the best fucking Star Wars movie of all time. There's no dissection or explanations needed. This is just some finely crafted screenwriting, and if you don't know about it already, fuck you. Get out of my house. So instead, I'm going to go over a little bit of fan theories surrounding Star Wars right now, and there's 2 major ones on the internet worth talking about. I'll go over one now, and then the other one I'll do the next episode, because it sort of pertains more to episode 6 than it does episode 5. So you probably know what I'm talking about, but we're going to hold them off until then. So anyway, the first theory worth mentioning is the Jar Jar Binks theory. The theory basically goes that in the prequel movies, the literal Phantom Menace of the series was supposed to be Jar Jar. He was hiding his evil under the shadows and would have been a great plot reveal to see his terribly stupid and benign character turn out to be the ultimate evil behind the entire Star Wars universe. Most people state that this theory would have been more supported by the films had George actually, gone through with it and not gotten cold feet when making episode 2, so he sort of quickly replaced Jar Jar's actions into the character we now know as Count Dooku, which explains why in the beginning we have fucking no idea who he is at the start of episode 2. Is this theory bullshit? Well, no, probably not. And you know why? Because I was working on the exact same theory back in episode 3, and I cut it for time. Unless, of course, that someone maybe, wanted to become a senator. And if so, who could do that? No, seriously, look, here's the script. I had a good 2.5 pages, which translates to roughly 7 to 10 minutes of review time. All of it devoted to the secret revelation that Jar Jar Binks was actually the true evil Sith Lord pulling the strings the whole time. It's hilarious that when I saw this theory pop up on social media, I was just like, shit, they stole my idea. Well, if anything, it just serves that it's not an entirely crazy idea, considering that at least 2 people came up with the same one at roughly the same time without ever having communicated with each other once. It's like that weird theory of shared ideas. It's almost like the motto myth. Oh my god! I just fucking cracked the Da Vinci Code. I fucking cracked the Star Wars code. Well, anyway, I'll post my deleted scene version of my Jar Jar theory on my website, and I'll link to it in the description. It won't be edited, so don't expect it to be the best writing in the world, but if you want to see where I was going to go with it, I'll put it up there. Number 3, the recap so far. Alright, so that wraps up the best fucking Star Wars of all time. Next episode, we're probably going to have to talk a little more because Ewoks. Just saying, Ewoks. So yeah, let's do the recap. Obi-Wan Kenobi had a master named Qui-Gon Jinn who was near and dear to him. Just before finishing their mission together, Qui-Gon is killed by a Sith Lord who Obi-Wan then also kills. He is now tortured by that loss. Anakin Skywalker is a small, soon-to-be Jedi with great power and potential to bring balance to the Force. Obi-Wan swore he would mentor the young boy and teach him the ways of the Force. The Trade Federation, who are separatists with their droid army, are secretly being backed by the Sith. It's very heavily implied at the end of the film that the newly elected Chancellor of the Republic, Palpatine, is actually the evil Dark Lord. Years later, Padme was under threat of assassination, so now Obi-Wan and Anakin, who has now grown up, are in charge of her protection. While working, they undercover the assassin and track her down. Obi-Wan, figuring out her employer, goes off to find him. Meanwhile, Anakin continues to protect Padme. While protecting her, he learns the fate of his mother on Tatooine and goes to rescue her. She dies, and through his vengeful anger, he gets his first taste of the dark side. Obi-Wan discovers an army of clone soldiers and brings them back to the Republic, thus starting the Clone Wars. The Sith make themselves known to the Jedi, and Anakin loses his hand in a fight with Count Dooku. Anakin and Padme get married, an act that's forbidden by the Jedi Order, thus needing it to be kept secret and set in motion their eventual emotional downfall. After the Clone Wars are well underway, Padme reveals to Anakin that she's pregnant, but immediately Anakin starts having dreams of her dying during childbirth. Also, almost immediately, Anakin starts looking for a way to save her. After a lengthy investigation, it is learned that Palpatine is in fact the Sith Lord that they've been looking for, and an arrest attempt is made. After it fails, Palpatine issues Order 66 and effectively eradicates all Jedi, sans a few. Anakin, being told by Palpatine that together they can save Padme's life, swears his allegiance to the dark side and becomes the evil Dark Lord, Darth Vader. Obi-Wan and Anakin fight, and Anakin loses, resulting in him being put in the robot suit and forever sealing his place by the side of the newly created Galactic Empire. Padme dies during childbirth, thus twins Luke and Leia are given up for adoption to be hidden from their father. Yoda and Obi-Wan go into hiding and await the day a new hope will arise. 20 years later, Luke is fully grown and living with his aunt and uncle on the farm on Tatooine. A rebellion that started against the Empire has stolen plans for their new superweapon, the Death Star, and are trying to escape with them above the planet Tatooine. The plans are accidentally sent down for Luke to find. Attracting the help of Obi-Wan Kenobi, now old and wise, and going by the name Ben Kenobi, Luke, Ben, and the droids meet up with the pilots Han Solo and Chewbacca in order to bring the plans to the rebellion. Ben does his best to instruct Luke in the ways of the Force. They reach the planet of the rebel leaders but find it destroyed by the Death Star. They're tractor beamed onto the ship where they rescue the princess, lose Ben to Darth Vader, and make their way to the rebel outpost. The heroes mount their offensive against the Empire by destroying their giant weapon, the Death Star, and proving that the rebellion is actually a force to be reckoned with and that Luke is on the path of becoming a Jedi himself. A few years later, the rebels are still trying to take on the Empire, and they relocated their base on Hoth. While on a routine scouting mission, Han and Luke find a probe droid attempting to locate them. Luke is knocked out by a Wampa, and the Ghost of Ben visits him to tell him to go to the planet Dagobah and seek out Yoda. After escaping the Empire once more, Han and Leia attempt to make their way to Bespin. They have a lot of romantic entanglements on the way there. Luke makes his way to Dagobah, where he begins to learn about the Force from Yoda. Han and Leia make their way to Bespin, where they're betrayed by the Empire, and Han Solo is frozen in carbonite and shipped off to Boba Fett. Luke confronts Vader for the first time, where he reveals to him that he was actually Luke's father. Luke manages to lose his hand and replace it with a robotic one. We end on a cliffhanger where everything has gone terrible, and our heroes are at their lowest possible point. There is nowhere left to go from here, but up. Number 4. The end. So that's it. Episode 5 in the can, motherfuckers, and holy shit, that means November is almost through. I have surprisingly still not made a Thanksgiving episode. So what do we have to look forward to at the end of the year? Well, we've got episode 6 of the Star Wars special. We've got episode 7 of the Star Wars special, probably like a day after that. Then it's Star Wars episode 7 itself in theaters. Super duper pumped. Then after that, I have a very special treat planned in honor of the genre of film that made my start here on YouTube as a reviewer even possible. For my Christmas special, I will be reviewing shitty Christian movies. With apologies to YouTube colleague Say Goodnight Kevin, who've sort of made those his speciality. I just can't stay away, man. I've got too much to say about these movies. Which, by the way, just a quick afterthought. Go check out Say Goodnight Kevin's Say Movie Night Kevin channel. He does some amazing reviews of some really terrible Christian movies, and it's quite hilarious. So anyway, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful weekend full of eating and overeating and maybe even dying a little from, too much food. And I hope you're super excited for the new Star Wars coming out in December, because I know I am. Anyway, I'm Swholli, signing out. Turkey giblets.